Time for another Bearded Wonder Explains. This time we are looking at communism. So we talked about last time a couple of different solutions, or the extremes of solutions to this kind of opportunity cost value situation. Do I want cheap stuff, or do I want social benefits like higher wages for lower class citizens, or environmentally responsible practices, or other things like that? And we talked about the anarcho-capitalist, which is on one extreme, and their solution. So now we're going to go all the way to the other extreme and talk about communism and their solution. So the situation here is that at least the way our society works, which is neither communist nor anarcho-capitalist, is that there's regulation on companies, and we kind of try to address this issue to find maybe a balance between cheap stuff and social benefit. Communists suggest that rather than doing regulation, we just have all-out control by the government. Now, if we do that, that means that the government controls the price of the things that are being purchased by the people. So one of the problems that we noted about regulation is that it always leads to an increase in the cost of production. And that normally leads to an increase in price so that the profit margin stays the same for the owner. Well, what if we just make the government the owner? Well, the government doesn't need money. Literally, it prints it. So what would they need with money to make a profit? So now we can take that out of the profit margin. And so maybe this is a way that we can have both. Not the problem, but the situation then becomes, if we make the store government property, right? People are all being paid by the government. And they are also working for the government. There's no one else to work for. The government owns all the businesses now, which is literally what communism means. The government owns the means of production. And so if you are working for the government, you're also buying things from the government. So if your paycheck and your products are both coming from your employer, in this case the government, if we look at all of those as a whole, the reality is that realistically speaking, you're going to get whatever the government gives you. You don't have any other options. Now, you may have options through whatever power you have over what the government creates, although there is an open question, and we're not dealing with it here, about political theory of communism. We're talking about the economic theory of communism. In other words, we're not dealing with rights and whether this situation, whether it's even possible for people to vote for a communist government any more than it would be possible for you to vote for, if somebody controlled all your food, clothing, and shelter and everything that you had, and they controlled the prices of those things, and they owned those things, how could you possibly have control over them when they control all of your basic necessities for life? But that's kind of a political question, and we're dealing with the economic theory of communism, which just states that it's going to be up to the government to make these decisions about price and social benefit. And so that's a real question. However, it's also important to note that these are not the only options that the government has available to them now, because they can also decide to address these problems by just causing certain people to work harder. In other words, whether it's forcing the 1% to give up all of their stuff. We're just going to tax the mess out of rich people, take all of their stuff, give it to the poor people so that we're all the same. Well, now you're making certain people give up more than other people, and that's going to be the benefit that we're going to see in society, and that's going to be how we address this problem. Historically, in a lot of communist countries, the solution is that the government ends up taking something from everybody else. And so you have like an elite class of government people, and then you have your everybody else who's not in the protected class of the government. And they just kind of are the ones that are sacrificing for the government benefit. And so you can either be a slave to the government in this sense, or you could reject this whole system of communism, and if you're choosing anarcho-capitalism, you are a slave to the market, the situation or the rules of supply and demand. Now, there's a question in both of these politically, whether you have or how much influence you have or we have as people on either of these conditions. In other words, if I'm a slave to myself, then I'm not truly a slave, right? That just means having decisions or options, and the degree to which I have choices is the degree to which I am not a slave. And we're not talking about chattel slavery, historic slavery in the United States where you are legally owned. We're talking about economic slavery, in other words, where you do or don't have choices. But on both ends of this extreme, you're slave to something, whether it's the market forces of supply and demand and other people choosing to buy your stuff or not. To a large degree, you don't have a choice. I can't sell this video, for example, to Paramount Pictures for $5 billion. I might like to, but they're not buying. I'm a slave to the market. Somebody has to want to buy what I'm selling. And that means that I have to offer it, whether I like it or not, at a price that somebody is willing to pay. That takes my choices or limits my choices quite significantly in the case of my videos. But the other option is to be a slave to the government, where they're choosing the prices that I pay and they're choosing what I get paid for things, and they're literally kind of through that process choosing what I get and what I don't. And so most of us would probably say that, or at least a lot of people would say, we're looking for something maybe more in the middle. And the question is that even possible? And so those are some of the questions that we're going to be addressing as we move forward in this course. That's it for us today. Hope you have a good day.